This time I'll open a public hearing on House Bill 3800 and invite Rob Owens and Mike Freeze to the dais. Good morning. You know, I'm not going to let you get away with the same same behavior as my co-chair. So
Yeah, exactly. You want to start?
yeah.
Good morning. Mike Freeze. I'm here representing Rattlesnake Creek Land and Cattle Company and also the farmers and ranchers in Harney Basin looking for a solution. So I think Co-Chair Owens will be walking through some of the provisions in the amendment, and I thought I would just sort of stay at a little bit of a high level. You will hear from a number of the community members and more detail about why this bill is necessary and the years of work that has gone into developing a plan for the Harney Basin. There's a long history here. I think, roughly I've heard from folks half a century where we've known that there was a problem there and the state has continued to over-allocate groundwater. And people, as you probably are familiar with, make huge investments based on water rights. Now we're in a situation where the state, and I think even this bill, will propose that we need to make sensible cuts in the area. The critical groundwater statutes are pretty broad in how they can apply. And I don't know that they are necessarily intended to work equally across every basin. I think one question that you'll have is whether or not it makes sense for the legislature to step in when there's an ongoing rulemaking. And I would appeal to you that this is exactly the point in time where this committee should step in and the legislature should weigh in to really balance, I think, the equities in the system, where I would argue that the current regulatory and statutory structures don't always are able to do that in the same way. So this is really, our hope and goal is to come up with a balanced structure for dealing with the Harney Basin. We need to stabilize groundwater. We know that. Need to protect investments that farmers and ranchers have made based on state-issued permits and water rights, and create some certainty out there for people that are in the basin with their businesses. Also, if they want to transition out, it's hard to sell a farm or a ranch when you don't know what water you have and what value that property will have. So this is complex. We didn't know that, and we'll walk through the amendment. There's some questions about, how this applies. How does this change? Does this set a precedent? I would argue that if it does set a precedent, that's exactly what the legislature is intended to do. That's why you're here, is when things aren't working, you fix them. I'm happy to take questions, but I thought Representative Owens could walk through the amendment.
Good morning, colleagues. Co-Chair Helm, members of the committee, for the record, Mark Owens, House District 60. Live in the middle of Harney Basin and Crane, a groundwater farmer there. This conversation is almost a decade old now. On May 26, 2015, the department came into our basin and said, hey, we made a mistake. They showed us a blue bar graph, showed the basin was over-allocated. Over-allocated by, 40, 50%. And the reason they knew it was over-allocated was a 1972 Robinson study. And they showed us 268,000 acre feet of recharge comes into the basin. 89,200 acre feet goes to springs and stream, leaving a remainder of 170,200 acre feet for all their uses. At that time, they had allocated 268,000 acre feet. We looked at it and said, surely this is a mistake. It wasn't. Surely this hasn't happened before. It had. And that started out a whole series of events. They said they would go with the USGS groundwater study, set up groundwater study advisory committee, which I became chair of, started place-based planning. The groundwater study was supposed to be completed in 2018, and that's when data collection finished. The study says, hey, you got a problem still. You have to use less water. Within a year of that study being published in 2022, April 2022, in the rules that happened in April of 16th of 2016, said they had to convene another rules advisory committee. They convened the Rules Advisory Committee in 2023. The first meeting of the Rules Advisory Committee was also concurrent with the Division 10 rules that was going on with the department. The Division 10 rules clarified what a critical groundwater designation rulemaking had to do. And so we are already in the middle process of a critical groundwater designation as they pass that rules. We can get real clunky here. So we're still in this rulemaking. Our next rulemaking, I won't be here, will be April 2nd, Wednesday. The department is going to roll out what we believe is their preferred alternative for regulation in the basin. We're still working with the department to understand those numbers. Those numbers were released in a PowerPoint presentation last Thursday. So this is still in flux. This is our best attempt to show you what our anticipation is. I just want to make clear that this bill will get kicked to rules. We're not going to have the time in order to finish this conversation by April 9th because of working with partners, working with the department to clarify what is needed. This bill is specifically to Harney Basin. This bill and any of these possibly precedent setting will be specific to the critical groundwater designation that is going to happen in the fall of 2025, period. The only reason we're doing this bill is the current rulemaking that's going on. So House Bill 3800 is supposed to be the balance between figuring out how to do regulatory and voluntary actions to reach reasonably stable. Also clarifying a voluntary agreement. So there's two ways in statutes that the department has the ability to hit reasonably stable. One is through regulation, how regulation occurs, a critical groundwater designation, and then a contested case. A contested case is the legal process in order to give the department to go in and shut off water. And their goal would be to hit reasonably stable. The other way is a voluntary agreement. A voluntary agreement came in the 1955 Groundwater Code. There's never been a successful voluntary agreement in the state of Oregon. Our community hopes to enter a voluntary agreement. We do. We want to work with the commission. We want to hit reasonably stable within a period of time. The department has taken it upon themselves to come up with a memo outlining the rules and regulations for a voluntary agreement. We don't feel that that memo is actually reflecting the flexibility that a voluntary agreement needs. It's more of duplicating a regulatory process. So we're going to put in this bill some clarification on what we'd like to see as far as regulation, volunteer actions, and a clarity on a voluntary agreement. So there's some things that are fairly clunky as you look to the amendment. So in Eastern Oregon, there's a lot of different rates. A rate is how fast you can apply the water. So there's a 1/80th rate to a 1/40th rate. A 1/80th rate is about 5.8 gallons per minute, maybe a little under. You cannot effectively irrigate an alfalfa field on that rate. The duties are pretty much the same. The total volume of water you can put on is about 3 acre feet. So the department, I believe, even in their rulemaking, is suggesting taking those 1/80th rates and allowing a little bit more flexibility so the water that's left can be irrigated efficiently. So we would say to move those rates to a 1/60th. Therefore, you can actually, even on an efficient system, effectively irrigate that crop. The department is trying to figure out with the community what is paper water compared to wet water. All the information that's going to be set towards regulatory action or volunteer action is based off of 2018 usage of wet acres. There's about 30% of the acreage in Harney Basin that is not wet, so it's considered a paper water right. One, we do not want to value the paper water rights, and two, we want to make sure that we're going off of the wet number because that's where reductions would have to occur from to make a difference in the water balance. So to modify your duty to actually what your beneficial use was over a 4-year period of time that was dry. So we've picked a number of 2.7 acre feet of water as a starting point because that would allow any alfalfa crop to be irrigated efficiently and not reward that little bit of extra water that's not needed. We don't want to put a value on paper water. We don't. So the couple things the amendments prohibit. The amendment would prohibit from accepting new water right applications unless connected with a mitigation program. Hey, we got to dry up quite a bit of water. Why would we want to allow the department to do new groundwater rights in the basin? You say, well, surely they shouldn't. Well, there's some transfers, there's some things occurring that we just want to codify that the community has said, and you hear from these farmers behind me, that we don't want any more appropriations in the basin, unless it's through a mitigation program. Mitigation program would allow you to change season of use transfers and stuff that cannot occur in a critical groundwater classification process. If you wanted to take something from agriculture to nursery, you wanted to take something from agriculture to industry, you set up the mitigation program so you trade a bucket for water so you can expand the economic impact that a bucket of water has. So that would take care of the issue of limiting any water rights applications to make sure that you're not limiting what you can do. But it'd have to be a bucket for bucket because we don't want new water. Here's one that's a little sticky. Permit Oregon Water Resource Department for enforcing decline conditions. So
Can
across
I
the state of
interrupt?
Oregon in the late 80s and early 90s,
Representative
Can
Levy
you
has a
go
question.
back? You kind of went really fast over the bucket for bucket, and that always grabs my attention because there's no possible way you can take a bucket of water out of any place and replace it back at the same time as the use. And I've been fighting that terminology since I became a commissioner on ODFW. It's a bad premise. It shouldn't even be in any kind of water law. I'm surprised that you're talking about that. It very much bothers me.
thanks, Co-Chair Helm. Thank you, Representative Levy, for the question. So this is different than the Division 33 rules that you're talking about
Yeah.
when you take a bucket of water out of a river and have to replace that bucket of water. So they're once again specific to Harney Basin. If I have 100 gallons irrigation right, after the critical groundwater designation, there's no clear path at how I could turn that 100 gallons into maybe a nursery right, how I could turn that 100 gallons into maybe an industrial right, how I could turn that 100 gallons into a quasi-municipal community well. So if I have 100 gallons that I have the right to, the ability to change that use of that 100 gallons is all that is.
Okay.
We can work through it. Permit Oregon Water Resource Department from enforcing decline conditions. So back in the 90s, the late 80s and 90s, the department started to put on some of the permits and certificates that if your well dropped more than 25 feet from the highest known static water level or the date the well went into production, that they could shut you off. December 25th to the first of the year this year, the department sent out 17 letters in Harney Basin of those people that had tripped decline conditions, telling them they had 60 days and they were no longer going to be able to irrigate. These people that had this decline condition since the 90s, never been enforced. We're still in the middle of a rack talking about critical groundwater designation. This was a surprise. Some of those rights are in the early 90s. Some of the rights that are, in the mid 2000s have the same permit decline condition, but because they were new or well, aren't getting shut off. So we have some users here that'll talk about how can you shut off a senior water right that has a decline condition when you're not shutting off a junior water right that might be right across the fence. And the junior water right might be contributing to the decline of the senior water right. But in a nutshell, success in this basin looks like reasonably stable water. Success in this basin within a period of time as we hit that new equilibrium. So if this community decides that they'd like to work with you on some flexibility here, our goal is going to be the same as the department to reach reasonably stable within the same period of time. So we're going to ask for that flexibility. Don't arbitrarily do permit decline conditions. Let's work through some of these issues. Amendments to outline requires to expedite permit transfers applications. Let's get this thing cleaned up. If we're going to move forward, we need a baseline. Let's make sure that everything that's in process gets finished so we know where we're at to start from. This one's a repeat. Identify groundwater use. They've been working to identify the groundwater use from the study. Cancel groundwater rights that are subject to cancellation under ORS 540.631 by January 2028. If they haven't been used for 5 years, the department has the ability to go in and cancel. Typically, that only process starts is if they get 2 complaints from people in the area to say start the cancellation process. The 30% of water rights that aren't currently being used haven't been used for decades. The community has said, and I agree, we want them shut off. So when we get through this process, either through a legislation or through a rulemaking, that you don't have people that have been speculating for water for 30 years that have never used their water right, now they have an opportunity because they were one of the ones that were allocated water. We want the people that have been actively irrigating and farming to have as many of them to continue to irrigate and farm. Adopt rules for adaptive management, provide annual data reporting. The rest of that's pretty simple, and I've talked about the mitigation. Require Oregon Water Resource department to deny extension application for development of additional groundwater unless the amendment is to modify location point of appropriation to reflect current locations. I've heard me talk about this in other bills we've had. So the department has provided extensions in the Harney Basin to 2035. So somebody has the legal right to continue to develop to 2035, even if it's a critical groundwater designation. Some of those priority dates are in the 1980s. Stop giving extensions out. The department has pretty much done this in the basin. They pretty much honored that. But we just want to make sure that we are clear and that we continue to support them in that. So there's a Harney Basin to you. It's part of the Harney Basin. So that is going to be the critical groundwater designation in the area. The department has worked with the community and we support the direction that they're going and dividing it up into sub-areas. We're going to follow what they're going to have when we believe in their preferred alternative and talk about 7 sub-areas. And the reason we're going to talk about 7 sub-areas is important because not every sub-area is reflecting the same decline as the other ones. If you look down towards the bottom of the map, you'll see Upper Blitzen and Lower Blitzen. So there's 3 distinct surface water flows that come into the basin. Down on the bottom, it comes off the Steens Mountains. Up on the top right, it comes off of another range and works down through there. On the left, it comes off a dry mountain and works through there. So the groundwater study actually produced 3 different hydrological budgets for this area. Down in the Upper Blitzen and Lower Blitzen, it actually says it's not overappropriated by statute. That area, they're going to recommend a 38% reduction. That area, from the data in 2018, ladies and gentlemen, the average depth that the groundwater has gone down is less than 5 feet. The average depth that the groundwater has gone down there is less than 5 feet. The water budget that the USGS put out says we're not over allocated in that area. Someone in the community you're going to hear today might say that's wrong. I would agree. So that's why we're talking the 7 sub-area approach, and that's why we're also going to talk about establish that no regulation can occur until the monitored irrigation well in the sub-area has declined at least 25 feet. A trigger. So if you look at the groundwater allocation rulemaking that the department did this last fall, they put a definition of basically what reasonably stable would be for issuing a permit. So now if you are going to be issuing a permit and your groundwater level hasn't declined 25 foot, if it doesn't decline more than 3 feet a year for 5 years, that they still have the ability to put out more water. So we have areas in the basin that haven't dropped 25 foot that are going to be shut off 38%. Or in different parts of the state, if you've only dropped 5 foot, they're probably still allocating water. Some reason we think there's a discrepancy there. That's why the trigger, that's why the 7 sub-areas. Establish a permissible total withdrawal for each sub-area. Permissible total withdrawal will be the amount of water that's going to be available for the sub-areas. So we've talked about a sub-area that's only dropped 5 feet. There are sub-areas in the basin that have dropped 120 to 140 feet. Hey, that's not good water management. We need to do something. So we would take a proportion of what the department says is the allocation of the water that's available, and we'd ask them through the statute to regulate a portion of that. And we'd ask them to work with the community to come up with volunteer reductions to make up the difference. So hypothetically, if they say, you know, we can allow 100 gallons in this area, we'll say, well, we want to allow 150 gallons for the first 30 years, and we want you to work with the community to figure out how to make up that difference. And if we don't reach reasonably stable within the same period of time the department puts out, we understand that you're going to have the authority to regulate more. But give this community a chance. Work with this community on a path for regulation and volunteer agreements. Establish off-ramps. If we're fortunate enough groundwater comes back up, we'd like to see what we can do with it. Pretty much covered a lot of this one. Volunteer agreements, said in the beginning. We've had some good conversation with Director Gall on volunteer agreements. So a volunteer agreement is if the department gives you a bucket of water that you can use on a piece of ground or multiple pieces of ground, we want to be able to go to the commission and say, hey, we'll limit ourselves to that amount of water. That's the goal, to reach reasonably stable. But we want the flexibility to be able to use that water on the best ground. Maybe we only use 6 inches of water here for a crop, where this crop takes more. might be able to make sure that we get the most economic impact for that bucket of water while not causing injury or exceeding the bucket of water. That's the premise of the voluntary agreement that we're going to go to. That's a lot. You're going to hear from some farmers. We still got to work with the amendment, still got to work with Mike. We'll get an amendment that's pretty well baked before we send it to rules. But this is a very specific and unique situation to Harney Basin. What we're asking for you guys to do is listen to these community members. Because some of this stuff is going to be only needed in Harney Basin, and we need to maintain this in Harney Basin.
Representative Bobby Levy.
Well, as you know, thank you, Chair Rep Owens. As you know, I have the undistinct pleasure of having lived in the very first critical groundwater area in the state. And everything you're talking about makes me almost want to faint, because it's very stressful for me, having went through what you're going through now and reliving it. And I can tell you that OWRD has never honored hardly anything that we agreed to. They come back all the time and want to change the rules. I just want you to be prepared for them to not do what you want them to do. And it's going to be a bad deal for Harney County. We used to farm on Dog Mountain. We used to grow potatoes there. And OWRD doesn't always follow what they say they're going to do. They change the rules all the time. Just be prepared.
Co-Chair Helm, Rep. Levy, thank you for the comment, and that's why we might put it in statute instead of rules.
Yes, Representative Sharp.
Thank you, Co-Chair Hom. I got out of college with very little math. That's full disclosure here. But on, I think it was maybe one of the very first slides you had, you talked about going from 1/80th, that one, going from 1/80th to 1/60th CFS. Isn't that pumping more water?
It's allowing a larger rate of warm water that you can apply at a single time, but it's not changed the amount of water that you can apply.
So you can pump more, but you would only be able to apply the same.
The reality, Rep. Scharf, is there's not a pivot in the Harney Basin that is working effectively that irrigates at a 1/80th rate, which is their rate. I've installed some of the most efficient systems in Harney Basin, and I exceed the 1/80th rate. So if you go below, if you irrigate at the 1/80th rate, you're actually producing less crop per drop. So what we're trying to do is maximize the amount of crop you can get per unit of water and not exceeding the total volume of water that can be used.
Follow up? So, Rep. Helm, or Rep. Owens, how does that affect the folks that don't have the water efficiency pivot irrigation systems like you have and other, and
But
farmers that could
Rep.
afford
Scharf,
that have?
It actually helps them, because, I mean, if they're not as efficient, if they're not hitting that 90% efficiency,
They're able to pump
and
more.
the 1/80th rate is imposed on them, you're gonna see more water wasted because this plant will go into stress.
And they'll be wasting more water.
Yeah, that's the whole reason, is to get the most crop per drop, is if you stress the plant, because you can't put enough water on the time that it's needed, it doesn't, you know that,
Yep.
the crop doesn't grow as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've tried to design systems down below that 5.8 gallons per minute breaker, and ended up actually getting less crop per unit of water. I can show you a lot of graph from 2017.
I'm going to ask a clarifying question here and then go to Rep. McLean. Rep. Owens, you and I have had a lot of discussion with folks around the state about the total duty and how different basins vary. And I think it'd be good for the committee to understand that the total duty that that is being suggested in the basin is not out of line with other places at all. It's actually fairly low. Maybe you could
The
expand.
total duty on a certificate now in Harney Basin, probably 99% of them is 3 acre feet. The reason I say 99% is I don't know one that's over 3 acre feet. What we propose, as you saw, is lowering that down to the average use of a 5-year dry period, which is going to be less than 3 acre feet. What you haven't seen is we're actually looking at the maximum amount of water you could put on would be 2.7 acre feet. So actually reducing the total amount of water, because there's not a crop in Harney Basin that you can't grow on the 2.7 acre feet of water. And compared to the rest of Central Oregon, I mean, there's fields in Central Oregon that get 6 acre-feet of water. Up in Rep. Levy's area, there's areas that need 4 to 5 acre-feet of water. But this would be less than the average use in Eastern Oregon.
Representative McLean.
You may have just answered part of my question. To me, I don't know enough about this. I'm just dangerous at this point with the amount of knowledge I've got. And so my understanding, though, of what the goal is, just to start there, the goal is to use water more efficiently. The goal is to honor those that are using water more efficiently and trying to offer them opportunities to do even better than that. I mean, the whole goal is use of water better and making sure that it's used in places where conservation and really looking at the data and trying to figure out, which crops are going to actually produce more with the water that you're providing. Is that close to the goal?
Co-Chair Helm, Rep. McLean, you've got enough information that you're becoming more than dangerous. Yes, that is the goal. The other goal I would state is this community, these farmers, also articulate, we want to hit reasonably stable. We want to hit that within that 30 to 40-year time frame.
Okay.
We want the opportunity to have some regulation and some volunteer actions.
Okay.
And if we can't get it, we understand the department would have to regulate more. We just want the opportunity to try to figure out as a community to reinvent ourselves, keep our economic position, and have the ability to reach stability.
Okay.
One other thing, Chair Helm. I apologize that we don't have an amendment for you to look at. This is really going to be complicated. Just walking through it is by itself. We had requested an amendment early last week. I don't think LC was even able to start on it until maybe Friday or Monday. We will get this in front of you, hopefully in time, and talk to you more about it so we can explain, but we'll welcome your questions at that time. I do apologize that you don't have something in front of you to look at before this hearing.
Good. Representative Marsh, I think you had a question.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through everything you have this morning, and look forward to the amendment. And I think rules seems like a good place to send this bill. But I do have a question just on a big level. What are the consequences for your community if you are not able to issue any new water rights?
Co-Chair Helm, Rep. March, what is the repercussions if we can't issue new water rights?
Yeah.
So the rulemaking, if we don't do a statute, is going to have that.
Right, and what are the how do you manage the economic consequences of that?
So, Co-Chair Helm, Rep. Marsh, great question. We're trying to manage what our economy looks like with the need to reduce.
Yeah,
So we understand that there can be no more straws sucking the groundwater out of Harney Basin. In fact, we're going to have to shut down some of those straws. We've spent thousands of hours trying to figure out how could we keep every farmer whole in this basin. And the reality is, in some of these suburbs, we can't. The reality, when your groundwater's dropped 140 foot, you have to do something. It's a closed basin, there's no surface water coming in. So it's something that we have to grapple with, but that's why we have the mitigation program too. So if there's a higher economic use for that water that does not cause injury or expand water use, we want that ability through the mitigation program.
well, I commend you for the work. You're on the forefront there, figuring out things the rest of us are still going to have to figure out.
I'll add a comment here and then go to Rep. Scharf along your lines, Rep. Marsh. If the community did nothing, and if the Water Resources Department did less or just stuck with their sort of de facto approach, I think what we'd see in the basin is a lot of litigation, a lot of community members fighting with each other over water. And that's not good for anybody. The water isn't going to be produced by litigation. And having a controlled, what would you call it, soft landing maybe here is really desirable and it's a desirable model for us to watch carefully and maybe when the time comes, take some of the tools out of that toolbox. and use them in other places. Representative Shar.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I guess I want to echo what Representative Levy said, because my panic in reading the base bill was that there's a whole lot of verbiage in here that says the department shall write rules, the department shall write guidelines. And I'm very, in every committee I sit in, I'm very scared of giving agencies any more power. We've delegated way too much of our authority out of this building to giving the agencies the ability to write law, which is our job. And in doing so, they basically would be giving away property rights. And property rights, water rights are property rights, and property rights have value. A property with a water right is more valuable than a property without a water right. When I go to look at buying a piece of property or selling a piece of property in the valley, there's a huge difference in the cost of that piece of property. And so I'm very concerned about us delegating that change to an agency. And I'm also very concerned about even putting that in statute without compensation to these folks, because it has generational effects to them, whether it's a temporary situation or a permanent situation. So I would just cautious on that. The other thing in the base bill, Rep. Owens, that I didn't see anything in the PowerPoint presentation or in the outline that you did provide to some of us, was a comment with respect that was in the base bill, which was a review of stock water exemptions. So I don't know if that's going to be a conversation moving forward with your forthcoming amendments, but I guess I would caution in that and how that's going to overlap with the excruciating work that was done on Senate Bill 85. I do not want to go down that road again.
Co-Chair Hell, Rep.
Please.
Sharp, the reason that language was there, that we're going to take it out, was because of Senate Bill 85, because
Okay.
Harney Basin will be a critical groundwater designation now, and as you know, it only allows 12,000 gallons for a new CAFO. Some of the ranchers that you're going to hear from today want to put a feedlot in that need more than 12,000 gallons, so that's why it was there, is to try to figure out the flexibility for these small family ranches to actually have a CAFO that could work.
Right.
I know it's caused a lot
Yeah.
of angst,
Yeah.
but because of Mike's great work on Senate Bill 85 is the reason we had to put it in there.
And that's why I said it, so your co-testifier could hear my itchiness in the hair in the back of my head go up. So thank you, Co-Chair. Just wanted to point those out.
One last comment from Rep. Levy, and then I think we're going to relieve you two and get on to the public
Well, I
hearing.
would thank you, Co-Chair, and thanks, Rep. Shar, for flagging the stock water, because we also have a lot of stock growers in our area, and we don't want that ability to go away or be touched. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. And I'll hand the gavel back over to Representative Owens.
At this time, we'll call up Commissioner Frank, or Rob Frank, Tom Doman, and Andy Root. A lot to get through. It's so complex.
Did well.
Well, I don't care. I didn't get an A in speech. You probably did.
Commissioner Frank, why don't you go first?
Gladly. Co-Chair Owens, Co-Chair Helm, Committee. I'm Rob Frank, Harney County Commissioner. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. The state has overallocated the water resources in the Harney Basin. And now we're in a predicament where we have to balance personal use, ecological use, and try not to completely devastate the largest economical driver in the county. And I think that we need to discuss in layman's terms what House Bill 3800 and the amendment to it would do. Basically, it allows a means for domestic personal water users to secure water, which is good. It also clarifies the regulatory authority of Oregon Water Resource Department, and more importantly, it allows latitude for the community to creatively problem solve. In our community, we've had stakeholders with a vested interest working for years to identify potential solutions to reduce our groundwater use and not completely undermine our economic integrity. We developed a groundwater use plan and an integrated water use plan, which we just had a unanimous first consensus round, and hopefully it will soon be approved by the state. But without the direction of this bill 3800, we might not be able to use those tools or the tools of voluntary agreements. We need this bill so we can maintain the cultural fabric of our county and we can ensure the water security for our future. OWRD needs this bill so that they have the tools and the guidance that they can fulfill their mission, which is to ensure the long-term stability of ecosystems, economies, and way of life. The whole state's looking at the Harney Basin right now, and I really hope that we can set a precedent for working with communities to meet the state's water supply needs. That's why I support House Bill 3800, and I hope you will too. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Colleagues, let's go through the first panel, then we'll ask for questions.
Chairs Helm, Owens, and members of the committee. My name is Tom Doman. I'm a rancher in Harney County, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on a subject that is important to the future of our county, groundwater management. This issue is just not about policy, it's about the survival of farms, families, and livestock that rely on groundwater for their survival. Water is the lifeblood of agriculture, sustaining the food that we eat, not just in Harney County, but in the state. Yet as we face a declining groundwater levels due to over-allocation, climate change, and increased demand, it is clear that we must take steps to protect this precious resource. My family's history with water management in Harney County goes back generations, and it could end. In 1950s, my grandfather built the canal from Chickahominy Reservoir to the South Ranch. In the 70s and 80s, my father carried that forward, irrigating thousands of acres of wheel lines and hand lines. Today, I irrigate with pivots. These advances in technology have made our irrigation practices more efficient, but we're still at the mercy of the groundwater availability. Like so many of my neighbors, I've seen firsthand the impact of declining groundwater levels on wells and irrigation systems. The bills here before you, which seek to address groundwater overallocation in Harney Basin, is a step in the right direction by providing resources to replace or deepen wells, improving groundwater monitoring, and implementing adaptive management strategies. It offers a framework to balance the needs of current water users with the imperative to protect our groundwater for future generations. However, as you consider these specific bills, I urge you to ensure the voices of those who live and work in Harney Basin are heard and respected. Water policy is complex. One-size-fits-all solutions often fall short when applied to diverse landscapes and livelihoods. We need to be flexible, fair, and transparent in the programs that affect water rights and irrigation practices. Thank you.
Co-Chair Helm and Owens and members of the committee. My name is Andy Root. I'm a farmer, rancher, and irrigator in Harney County. My wife and I have raised our 7 children on our family farm and are blessed to employ a few of those children, as well as some of the 14 grandchildren, the ones that are old enough to reach the tractor pedals. The farm is our home. Beyond our family, it provides employment for 40 families in our community and summer jobs for teenagers. It sponsors local sports teams, our county fair, meals at the senior center, and fundraising benefits as families in our community have faced hardships. We have worked hard and invested everything we have into this place we call home. The reason I am here is to ask for help from the legislature to balance our community's economic needs and provide some certainty around stabilizing our groundwater resource. For us, groundwater and economy are closely linked and requires a thoughtful, well-balanced approach. I have personally spent countless hours working with the department and other water users on a path for regulating groundwater use in Harney Basin. Years and years of work while the department continues to issue groundwater rights. Now the department is proposing significant cuts to groundwater use that will bankrupt farms and economically decimate our community. Those cuts are based on data and modeling that include years of drought, and in my opinion, do not accurately reflect what is needed for responsible, stable aquifer. And any risk of being wrong is really borne by the farmer and the ranchers, and ultimately the community. Meaning if the agency is wrong, they won't be able to correct those mistakes until family businesses already go bankrupt and our community goes beyond repair. To avoid significant economic fallout, we need to take a measured approach in setting limits on groundwater use. Those limits should reflect what is possible while still allowing for many water users to continue to have the ability to produce valuable crops and stay in business. This can be done by improving voluntary agreements to ensure water users have flexibility in how they can meet reduction targets. In addition, the legislature should continue to invest in non-regulatory programs that can drive reductions and maintain a stable business community. Lastly, we all have to realize that some cuts will be necessary for the greater good. A shared sacrifice model will incentivize efficient water use and maximize the number of water users that can use water, all while stabilizing the aquifer. Water policy is a very complicated. This is no exception, but my ranch and our community are simply too important to risk using the current approach at OWRD. Please help us with supporting HB 3800.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Questions for these three?
I don't have a question.
Kathleen?
My comment is, thank you for coming today. And I would use you as an example of a group of people who are looking at the problem, trying to keep the goals of reduction and trying to work together to make it successful as far as use of water. So I just want to say that out loud, because this is an important issue, not just to Harney County, but to the whole state. And I really respect the two members on this committee that talk about water rights and implications of unintended effects, and we have to deal with that too, but thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
With this time, we're going to go to two people that are online, and then we still have four more in the room to testify. So I'd call up Zach Freed and then Kimberly Priestley on deck.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Co-Chair Helm, Co-Chair Owens, members of the committee. For the record, Zach Freed with the Nature Conservancy. Thank you for the opportunity to talk this morning. The Nature Conservancy is neutral with concerns on the amendment outline that we just heard about to House Bill 3800. I want to take a minute to just say that I've participated, and the Nature Conservancy has participated in the Division 512 rulemaking since it began about 2 years ago. And more importantly, we've worked with the Harney Basin community since about 2016, 2017 to try to find voluntary solutions for water management. I currently serve as the chair of the state's Groundwater Advisory Committee that Rep. Owens mentioned earlier. And one thing in all of those three hats that I want to reiterate is that I think there's widespread agreement that success in the Harney Basin is sustainable use with stable groundwater levels. We heard that earlier from Vice Chair Owens. I strongly agree with that. I think there are some elements of the proposed -1 amendment that are well aligned with that goal and well aligned with prior collaborative conversations. And those elements include things like canceling unused groundwater rights or preventing new appropriations. Those are common sense tools that we should have in our toolkit. However, other components of the proposed amendment outline that we saw earlier have not been as well vetted and may be counterproductive to the goal of achieving a sustainable, secure water future for the Harney Basin. For example, I want to call attention to the proposal to prohibit Water Resources Department from utilizing permit decline conditions. In my opinion, I think now is a time where we need all the tools in the toolkit available to right-size water use. And so we should not be removing tools from the water management toolkit. I want to say I heard a lot of good discussion from you all on the committee about many of the components of 3800. I want to briefly talk about one that I didn't hear as much discussion about, which is setting permissible total withdrawals, or in other words, setting the sustainable rates of pumping in the basin. It's a little unclear to me why the legislature would be the body to establish these total permissible withdrawals in statute instead of going through the ongoing rulemaking process, which has had dozens of meetings and dozens of participants from the community involved. The curtailment schedule being discussed in the rulemaking itself is steep. I agree with that, but it's based on forecasts, it's based on modeling, it's based on groundwater studies. And we should be using the best available evidence to understand what sustainability looks like. On the other hand, the proposed PTWs in House Bill 3800 have not been modeled. We don't know that these proposed curtailments will actually be sufficient to achieve success. So I want to just say that I do look forward to continuing discussions on House Bill 3800. The Nature Conservancy and myself personally have a vested interest in making sure that we actually achieve the goal of a sustainable, secure water future for Harney Basin. I'm just concerned that there's some elements of the proposed -1 amendment that need more discussion, need a little more work to be able to achieve that goal. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to talking more.
Thanks, Zach. Kimberly.
Good morning, Co-Chairs Hellman Owens, Vice Chair Finger McDonald, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kimberly Priestley, and I'm here representing Water Watch of Oregon. Water Watch is a river conservation group that works to protect rivers and operates statewide. We are here today to testify in opposition of House Bill 3800 and forthcoming amendments. As in our opinion, they would undermine the state's existing statutory authority and duty to manage and protect groundwater in the Harney Basin to ensure the preservation of the public welfare, safety, and health. As a bit of background, I think you've heard this already, but there are two processes underway in the Harney Basin related to addressing groundwater overallocation in the basin. The Harney Place-Based Collaborative that has been meeting since 2016 and has spent years formulating a consensus-based groundwater plan. And as you heard, the Oregon Water Resources Department's Division 512 Rules Advisory Committee has been meeting for nearly 2 years. Water Watch is an active member of these processes, though we are not testifying on their behalf. I did want to say that neither the bill nor the amendments were discussed with the Harney Collaborative or the Division 512 RAC. Water Watch just learned of the amendment concept this last Friday, and while we haven't seen the actual amendment language yet from the outline, we have seen it's our assessment that the bill will undermine collaboration, science, longstanding water right conditions, and the ongoing rulemaking process. I won't go over all of our concerns, but just wanted to highlight a few with the amendment concept as we understand it. It would allow unsustainable use of groundwater in the Harney Basin. It would directly interfere with the rulemaking process. It would directly override the proposed groundwater pumping limits developed by the department in the rulemaking process and legislate significantly more pumping. And just wanted to note that the majority of this increase would occur in the Northeast Crane sub-area, elevating certain economic interests over sustainability. It would also prohibit enforcement of water right conditions that exist to ensure the preservation of the public welfare, safety, and health. It would require the state to approve voluntary agreements among groundwater pumpers that don't have to meet groundwater management standards. And it would trump the state's ability to regulate groundwater in the soon-to-be designated critical groundwater area. In sum, this bill takes water management in the Harney Basin in the wrong direction and undermines years and years of work towards finding a durable solution. We urge opposition to this bill, including opposition to moving it to rules for further work, and instead hope you allow the state to finish its work in the Division 512 rulemaking. Thank you very much.
Kimberly, thank you. Mark here, I do have one question. So on the proposed PTW that was shared with you, I thought that was a proportional, same percentage for every sub-basin that would allow more. So, I mean, our intent was to go 50% more on every sub-basin as a starting point. But you do call out one specific sub-area. Why do you call out one if they were all the same percent of increase?
Co-chairs Owens and Helm, I think co-chair or Representative Owens, as you know, Lisa Brown from Water Watch has been working in the basin for over a decade and is part of the RAC and is part of the collaborative. And she did the math for me. So I'm going to request that any questions be directed at her. And she said she was unable to attend today, but is happy to talk to any legislator if they have questions about our testimony.
Thanks, Kimberly. And I'll just say for the committee that we perfectly went an exact percentage of what we believe the preferred alternative department is, irregardless of sub-area, irregardless of anybody that's in this. So if we did change the percentage to a different percentage for different sub-areas, that's not the intent. In fact, the only other sub-areas that probably do get maybe preferential treatment is the ones that have not gone the 25 foot. And that is not the northeast sub-Crane area. So, thanks, Kimberly. With that, let's call up Tony Hackett and Merle Reed. And then on deck will be Fred and Jacob.
You go first.
Colleagues, please bear with these gentlemen. I'm not sure if Salem's ready for them.
Good morning, co-chairs Owens and Helm, and Vice Chair McDonald, and members of the committee. My name is Merle Reed, and I live in Harney County. And I'm kind of unique here because I don't have a farm or ranch. So this is educational to me, but I do have two businesses in Harney County. I have a restaurant and I have a convenience store. So they're not really egg related, but I do know that as agriculture, as the livestock and the hay growers do well, our businesses and our community do well. And I think in listening to a lot of these farmers and ranchers, with them spending over 6 years having meetings with OWRD and trying to work through a process and trying to come down with reduction, because they know that there is overusage. But some of that has to fall back on ORD because they're the ones that have allowed the permits and the well drilling in areas that is, I'm not into math but I can tell you, you can't poke so many holes in the ground in a certain area without putting a damage to the water table. But the ranchers and farmers have been working to help come up with solutions. And then what was disappointing to them is in December, where they came out with 17 letters of cease and desist orders for these ranchers to do that. And that's not what they were working towards. They're working on solutions to come up with this. So I'm here to speak economically what the impact would be for the whole county, for the Robbins equipment, which is the tractors, the Les Schwab, the tires, the Point S, the tires, the parts store, the fuel companies, the trucking companies, any businesses in Burns, in the real estate. It's all going to be a huge negative impact. And in one of the meetings I did go to, they asked like what dollar figure, and they don't even know what the trickle down figure, but at least $60 million will be lost in our district, in our county, and that is devastating to any county, especially a county that's so dependent on agricultural. So I support House Bill 3800 because we have to put, as Miss Senator, I don't know how to address you, Mrs. Marsh, you're exactly right. The OWRD needs to be held accountable and held to their standards, and that's what hopefully House Bill 3800 will help us do. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Co-Chairman Owens and Helms, Vice Chairman McDonald, and members of the committee, thank you for having us. My name is Tony Hackett. I'm a local member of the community, growing up in the 70s as a farmer all the way up into the 80s, and now a drilling company in downright drilling in Burns, Oregon. My point on this is, growing up as a farmer in the 70s, our farm, we had 400-foot wells. We pumped from 60 feet. We irrigated 640 acres. Around 78, I stood beside my father when he spoke to the water master, Bill, and called the water resources, talking about wells being drilled all around our place. And we had senior water rights, and they kept installing pivots around us in the early 80s. Our water table dropped to where we dropped our pumps to the bottom of the wells and then had to start looking for more water. Yet the state did nothing. The state has done literally nothing to 2025 for the same ranch. To this day, they have done nothing. In the meantime, water rights were giving out since the 80s all the way to just 7 years ago, with extensions going, as Representative Owens said, to 2035. So there's still people trying to put in more pivots, more wells. In the meantime, people that I work with, the community is like family to me, from Denial all the way to Seneca. And my wife and I both graduated in Crane and still live in Harney County. And it's pretty personable when you grow up with everybody and realize they've all been doing their job. They've been dealing with the growth that's been going on, but constantly asking to slow it down, to stop giving out more water rights. Yet they keep giving them out. They quit answering our questions, then turn around and want to show up and shut them down because they overallocated. Well, we knew this back in the 80s. We knew this in the 90s. We knew this in 2000, but nothing was done. And now we have customers ourselves that were informed, you use it or lose it. If you don't get it in production, you lose your application to your water right. I have customers that have proof they've got up to $1 million in the last 5 years, upgrading, putting in new pivots, drilling the wells, putting water meters on. Then the state come out during their application and said, you need to install a monitor well for us to monitor your water, a separate well. They come in, drop their little cylinist in it, lock the well, don't say a word, then turn around, still no water right. The people still farming, trying to keep going. And then 18 months ago, one of my customers finally asked their water right lawyer, where's my water right? He said, well, the only solution we got is the state offers a chance to expedite it for $2,000 per well. So people have been paying for this extra money on top of everything they've done, turned around, received a letter after January 2nd of this year, cease and desist those wells, still did not get their water right. One of my customers got their water right yesterday. After 18 months expediting everything else, still, then they got the letter to cease and desist their well. And over the 5 foot per 3 years, 15-foot drop. Different water rights have different regulations. Some have 25 foot, some have 15. There's nothing consistent with the water resources. For starters, they never have done anything for us from 1978 to 2025. Then they turn around and they say, well, we made a mistake. We're going to cut back. And they've turned around and misled people to this day that if you don't use it, you lose it. They spend their heart and soul. They put everything up for collateral. They meet the requirements the state tells them to be turned around and given a letter without notice. We are on a RAC committee. We've been dealing with this for 5 to 7 years, meetings, shutting down our rigs, shutting down farms, everything. Well, they get paid to come in Burns and tell us we had a good meeting. This was good, pat you on the back, send you out the door, and then they turn around and come back here and write what they want to write. They literally do nothing that we discuss sometimes in our meetings. They just do what they want to do. And I'm here to just say it's just the House Bill 3800 will give us a chance as a community to work together and try to solve a problem that the state did to us. We didn't do this. I said in a public hearing when one of the state WOWR members turned around and told the people there that you did this to yourself. We did not do this to ourselves. They over allocated so much, and they blame us for pumping too much water. And we cannot get that through their head. They are dead set that you did this to yourself. And I just, if we did that to ourselves, let us fix it then, because we didn't do it to ourselves. And so as a driller, I've used new technology on all our drilling. We make sand-free wells. We're trying to protect the resources. We don't just punch a hole in the ground. Water Resources is also supposed to be responsible to protect the resources. We've had wells as a kid. We had power poles fall in. We've had over-pumping of sand. To this day, the state still does nothing about it. That is another job they have. So I'm just saying, that's all I got.
No, keep it. You can go a little bit longer. Just wrap it up.
Oh, okay. Wrap it up. Well, and that's the problem I have. I don't know when to shut up. But I'm just saying, I hope we have your support and helping the community try to fix our problem that we did not create. Thank you.
Thanks. Rep Levy and then Rep Short.
I just want to tell you, thank you, co-chairs. I 100% agree with you. We've had all the same problems in my district, all the same problems with OWRD. Thank you.
Rep Short.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I have a question for you. So when I buy a piece of property here in the valley, when I was a kid growing up, we bought a piece of property. We got an artesian well off of it. I was pretty lucky. But before my dad bought that piece of property, he had it witched to make sure there was water on it. And then we drew the wells before we bought the property, before we signed the deed to make sure that there was water on it, and struck gold, basically. Are folks buying property thinking there's water on it? Or are folks buying property being told there's water on it? Are folks buying property being told they can drill? Why are people buying this property thinking they can get water?
Okay, what has been going on lately is a lot of investors are buying it. We have people putting in properties in that area that downright drilling does not drill for. I will not drill for neighboring properties in areas that I already know we had a problem. I grew up there. I know where the water issues are. And for the record, the entire county is not in trouble. The Department of Water Resources wants to handle it as one problem, but it is sectional. That's why you saw that map of different zones. There are places we don't have it, and we do. We have investors from San Diego, San Francisco, Washington, Idaho that buy that land because it is cheaper in Harney County if it isn't developed. You're buying sagebrush. They look at a turnkey thing, slap some wells, put some pivots on it, and sell it. And it's investors, people trying to make money. We've had these people can't get us to drill the wells, so they turn around and hire drilling companies out of California. They've had them come out of Albany. They run over, punch the holes because they just want to get it in production. Again, the investors are told use it or lose it, so they do everything they can to slap it in real fast and dump it. And so it isn't all locals trying to expand. No, it's new people coming in because they're given the water right. They're given the water right application.
Thank you, sir.
Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Exactly what I wanted to hear.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just to add a little add to that, Rep. Sharf. So April of 2016, the first rulemaking through said we're no longer going to process any new applications. But at that time, 30% of the applications still had the legal right to come online. And those had a extension date to you have to use it by this time or lose it. And some of those extension dates are still in the present. So people think they need to get the water in before their water rate becomes invalid, not maybe doing or full understanding that there's not water available. But they also might have a senior water right even though it's not been developed because the extensions are going on for 30 years. So it's a convoluted mess. We'll call up the last two, I believe, Jacob and Fred. I keep grabbing this thing. I don't know either.
Thanks.
You ready?
Go first. No, you go first.
All righty. Can you guys hear me? Chair, co-chair, members of the committee. My name's Jacob Davis. I'm a third-generation farmer rancher in the Lower Donner Blitzen. My grandpa come to the area in the Lower Donner Blitzen in the 50s and hit really great water, 100-foot wells with good pumping, and he started out flood irrigating and then over time graduated to pivots. But he raised his family, and 3 of his boys decided to partner up with them, and one was my dad, and that's where I was raised. Well, then in the late 90s, my dad and mom wanted to be their own partners. And so they bought the place 12 miles down the road, which was part of the old place. And it was bare ground. We just ran cows on it. And they really hit great water. 100-foot wells where we're pumping at 35 to 47 feet, and we're pumping 2,000 gallons a minute. I mean, that's not even what the wells will maxed out at. We don't know what they max out, but that's all the water we needed. So anyway, fast forward a little bit more, that opened up some room for my wife and I to come back and go work for the family. 2012, my wife and I bought some ground next to them and hired Tony that you just heard to come drill us a well, and same deal. We're pumping 2,350 gallons a minute at 47 feet. The well's 100 foot. Every March, we pay for the static to be checked, and they come and check it and report it back to the state of Oregon. With very few, there's little decline, is what they tell us. So I don't think there should be any reductions right now in the Lower Donner Blitzen like the state of Oregon wants us. They want like 38% reduction in Lower Donner Blitzen. Well, that's going to hurt my wife and I that took out a lot of money from the bank to pay for all this. However, I told you I was a third-generation farmer rancher in the Lower Donner Blitzen. I want my kids to be a 4th. So I strongly don't think we need any more drilling in the Lower Donner Blitzen. I don't think they should let any more transfers happen in the Lower Donner Blitzen. I'm still frustrated with the state of Oregon because here a few years back, they let, like Tony said, some investors come in, buy some water rights in the Weaver Springs sub-area that had dry holes, transfer it 26 miles into our backyard, and they're just now developing those wells and pivots. They put 10 of them in. That should not have happened, and the priority date should have changed when they transferred that, not from the priority date of that well. So I didn't agree with that. I don't agree with wells being left alone for 5 years and not getting anything pumped. I mean, my family and most everybody in that county relies on that water every year to make their income, support their families, the local businesses, everything. If someone lets a well set for 5 years, but now they're just now developing them again because they're worried about losing their water, that tells me they don't need that every year like the rest of us. And so I don't believe in that. The water extensions, in 2012, when we developed our well, we had 5 years, and we got it done in 5 years. I don't understand why they put extensions on these that go beyond 5 years. I mean, it's like, if you want it bad enough, let's get it done. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for taking time to meet with me. I appreciate it.
Co-Chair Helm and Co-Chair Owens and Vice Chair McDonald and members of the committee. My name is Fred Flippins. I'm from Burns, Oregon. My day job is the general manager of Harney Electric Co-op. We are a rural utility, and the word rural is a bad term because I really call us a frontier utility. We cover 20,000 square miles. To give you kind of context to that, that's about the size of the state of West Virginia. We have 2,600 miles of power line, 400 miles of transmission power line in that area. The difference between my territory and West Virginia is I only have 1,230 members. My job is to supply them with reliable, safe, and affordable electricity. Most of my members are irrigators. A lot of the folks that you've heard here today, our co-op supplies them power. And I will say, they're actually my bosses, because as a co-op, the members own the co-op. They give me the privilege of running that co-op for them. What a co-op does is it buys power in bulk. You know, we all group together, we buy power in bulk. The co-op gets that power delivered out to each member. To give you kind of an idea, also, we cover 5 different counties in the state of Oregon. We touch mostly into Harney County, Malheur County, Lake, and then some in a little bit in Crook and Deschutes County. But we also serve the northern half of Humboldt County in Nevada. 68.25% of Harney Electric's revenue on an annual basis is from irrigation sales, what we call sales to pumps. In our area, you don't get water out of the ground unless you pump it. So we are the source of power to make that happen. A lot of the current regulations that are coming down are going to affect our community greatly. Part of that is also the cost of power. And I know in the halls of this great building, there's been a lot of talk about power rates and where power rates are going for all of our consumers. A lot of that has to do with, in our case at Harney Electric, in the past here, in the last 5 years, has been the cost of our power from Bonneville Power Administration. A lot of that comes from regulation about mitigating for salmon and steelhead and adds costs to what we do. We end up spilling a lot of water over dams rather than providing power for us. And so that has gone up. Also, cost of supplies, and that thing has, with inflation over the last 4 or 5 years, has been horrendous. So just as of January 1st, Harney Electric did a 17% rate increase. That's the largest rate increase that I remember us doing in my 23 years there. And it's one that it's the first we've done in 5 years. We've tried to keep the costs down, and so it has gone up. We are not like a lot of investor-owned utilities. We do not try to make millions of dollars for investors back in New York City. We make money enough to cover our costs, and then also make enough money to keep reinvesting in the system to make sure that it is safe and reliable and that it works every day, that when you go to that light switch, you turn it on and the power comes on. The co-op went in the last year from what we call our margins, or in some worlds they call it profit. We call it margins because it's the amount of money we allocate back to our members. We made $1.5 million in 2023. We made $344,000 in 2024. That's part of why we did the rate increase. But I just did a quick analysis of just the 17 letters that OWRD sent out to those irrigators, and those irrigators are all of Harney Electric's customers. I do not have the information because unless I do a FOIA with the OWRD to tell me exactly who got each letter, I can only go from the information they gave me that it's 17 irrigators, but it's a total of 42 wells. So I did kind of an average of the horsepower of those wells, approximately 125 horsepower average. That's kind of the average of an irrigation well. Just shutting those down, if we continue on the path we are, shutting them down March of next year, that will reduce our margins by $750,000. So just as a reminder, somebody said math was not your strong point. I only made 344, and now I'm going to go down by 750. We will be at a negative, which makes me turn around and have to talk about raising rates again. And so you look at the irrigator that didn't have to shut down but gets left, he's going to have to even make up that difference. So the ones that are left trying to produce are going to have higher costs. But also this has a ripple effect in our community. You know, we struggle enough in Harney County. Rep. Marsh, you mentioned about what's it going to do to our economy. You know, over the last couple of years, we've lost a grocery store. We've lost Rite Aid. We've lost several businesses like that that have not come back, and we see no prospect of it coming back. Agriculture is the #1 producer of income in Harney County, and we all survive off of that. So I'm asking that you support HB 3800. Let us come up with a solution to this problem. As people have said, OWRD, you can call the agency, whatever. The state of Oregon caused this problem in Harney County. I can tell you where we were at. I can remember having OWRD at one of our co-op board meetings 10 years ago when we were worried about building power lines to pumps, when there was talk about, well, we may shut those pumps off. Well, we don't want to make an investment, build a power line into a pump, and then have somebody shut it off. So we had OWRD at our board meeting, and we said, do we need to stop making these investments? You know, what's going to happen? We were told by OWRD, if those people have the permit to do the well and everything, you can build that power line because we will not be shutting that off. We may at some point stop issuing and stop allowing new wells, but we're not going to shut stuff off. So we continued to make investments over the last 10 years into power lines to wells. And my last comment is, remember folks, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over.
Yeah, that is for sure.
Not an understatement.
Colleagues, we are running a little behind on time.
whiskey makes me
I just have one question for Fred, and those who are here for the next bill, we do have their permission to go to 9:55, so we will get you in. We will gavel that in to make sure we have a quorum before we get there. So Fred, if potentially 38% of the irrigation was shut off in Harney Basin, what would that do to a domestic power rate?
Well, the co-op has fixed costs that it has to cover. No matter whether I sell 1 kilowatt or 12 million kilowatts, I still have a fixed cost. We have an office, we have staff. You have to maintain that power company. And so really, if you think about it, all we do is we have these expenses, we charge enough for the power to cover the cost. So if there's less people, so if I sell 35% less power, that means that the 65% are going to have to make up that difference. You could see probably our average household, probably just for residential power, Rep. Owens, is probably somewhere around $125 a month now. I would say that if we reduce irrigation by 35%, you're probably looking at those people are going to have power bills of $300 to $400 a month. And we also serve an Indian reservation. Those people today, that tribe, has a difficult time making the payments even with assistance today. And so it's going to make it really rough on a lot of people.
Thanks, Fred. Last question, Fred Marsh.
Thank you. Fred, I want to just thank you for coming over. I don't know how often you get to Salem, but I want to assure you that the co-ops and the values they bring to their communities and the way you stand up for your customers are well understood and appreciated here. Our co-ops are well represented in the building. want to, again, thank you for showing up and assure you that we are very aware of the value you bring to communities.
Thank you.
With that, we'll close the public hearing on 3800.